Okay, so 1940, they've overrun France.
Yes.
Hooray, well done, go us. And they're starting to bring in Panzer IIIs in good numbers. They've
Yes.
captured the Czechs.
Yes.
And I presume they're looking at some of the Czech designs going, oh, that's a good idea.
They did that, and they said also, oh God, we need this. Don't forget how scarce they were on tanks. Half of the invasion force in Russia later is actually borrowed, bought, or stolen. One guy, Professor Müller, one German military historian, actually called what invaded the Soviet Union a rolling military museum. Because you have hundreds of lorries, dozens of tanks, it's just a mishmash of tanks and vehicles, and they were so desperate to get their hands on everything they could.
And so good luck getting spare parts for your captured French lorry from 1940.
Indeed that. I mean, it's 2018, and people are still debating on Facebook photographs, clear photographs of tanks, and what's this? I don't know. And these guys are experts, because you will always find another obscure captured tank made improvised gun carrier with some strange name, and a guy is sitting and saying, hi, that's my tank. And people don't know what they're looking at. So they were really desperate to get their hands on it. At the same time, the political leadership in Germany was stopping armament, really slowing the armament, because they were, I have to get a little historical lesson here.
Okay.
The Nazis were always afraid of a new 1918. They wanted to make their war in the East. They always wanted to be warlike people now, because that's the core of the National Socialist ideology. But they were always afraid that if the war would get people to starve again, the people would revolt again, like in 1918. So for the Nazis, it was never butter or guns. It was always butter and guns, and rather butter than guns. So when France fell so quickly, they said, okay, that worked well, make more butter.
Yeah.
So you would expect that they drum up the tank numbers before they invade the Soviet Union. They didn't. Yeah, they doubled their panzer divisions because they have the numbers of tanks in each division. Because they are so secure that this will work, that they just started with what they had and what they stole and what they bought. Yeah.
Okay. So they go into Russia, they realize, we seem to have a problem here. The Russians have bigger tanks than we thought they did.
Yep.
And so does this start a doctrinal revolution, or was it simply a technological reaction? i.e. bigger gun, more armor?
Basically that. The respect for what the Red Army can do started very quickly on the normal soldier level, on the ground. They recognized their enemies as fierce fighters immediately, even if they got these whole big 100,000, 500,000 prisoners of war numbers at the beginning. But they saw they could fight fiercely. But the officer always said, okay, they're just the Red Army, as actually everybody else believed when the Germans invaded. Everybody was expecting.
The Finnish had just taken them on.
Red Army will collapse in few weeks. Everybody was convinced. It's worth mentioning that the Germans, when they invaded France, expected nothing short than World War I reloaded, and were surprised by what happened. When they invaded the Soviet Union, they were expecting Blitzkrieg and were getting World War I reloaded. That's very important. So, but nevertheless, they said, okay, they are not collapsing like we ordered them to, but we just keep on going. Because on the tactical level, yes, the KV-1 or the T-34 were really, really impressive, hard to take out. They were a piece of work for them. But then again, we are the Wehrmacht. You just go around and hit it out from the behind. So they solved that problem. Of course, they upgunned and up-armored their tanks. There was the short tank terror again, tank terror reloaded, so to say. Although much of the T-34 terror was based on the confusion of KV-1s and T-34, because they didn't know what the Soviets had in store. And when the T-34 became prominent as a name, at the Wehrmacht soldiers, everybody was calling everything a T-34.
Like every gun that the Germans had was an 88.
Indeed, and every Panzer was a Tiger later. So, they saw that, they solved the problem. But easy as this sounds, on the operational level, they bled out. When they reached Moscow, they were bled dry, or bled white, as we say in German. The German army reached Moscow on all four, so to say.
Yeah, it's like on fumes.
On fumes, indeed. It's not that the winter saved Moscow, or anything or luck or something. They gave their strength getting there.
There is, I'm sure you've seen Dr. Reginald House has made a couple of statements along the lines of before the invasion of Barbarossa, the German logisticians said, we can get you about 700 kilometers.
Yes.
And, well, that's about as far as they got.
Yeah.
So you would agree with that assessment?
I would. And that's another important point. People always ask me, you're always talking about social and cultural history. How do you connect this to tanks? And there you got it. The Wehrmacht is mightily influenced by the Prussian tradition of doing things, of the Prussian army. And for the Prussians, logistics was third-class action. You don't bother with logistics if you want to be a supreme leader, gallant on the field, just let other people do. When they planned the invasion of Soviet Union, they didn't plan anything regarding fuel, regarding food, regarding winter clothes, ammunitions. Everything was timed for 6 weeks, roughly. And then let's go and see how this works out. And when it didn't work out, they quickly realized it. There's a quote from Halder, Chief of General Staff, saying, again, I paraphrase, of course, he says, that didn't work out. We have no idea what to do next. We just keep on going. That's the German Wehrmacht General Staff for you. Just keep on going. Let's see what happens. They have to collapse sooner or later. No, they don't. Yeah, this is when Blitzkrieg is stopped in its tracks, basically. Blitzkrieg, quotation marks. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it is one of the things like people. I'll often still get a little bit of vitriol of being a Sherman defender.
Oh no, not for me.
It's kind of like, look, this tank was built in America, and you got to fight in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
I don't think the designer of the Jagdpanther over there had to worry about getting that thing to Pacific Island and then the supply lines and the fuel lines and so on. Yeah. So it's each military has its own set of requirements.
Yeah.
So speaking of sets of requirements. We've gone into Russia, we've realized, okay, they got bigger stuff, we need bigger stuff. They upgunned the Panzer III, they upgunned the Panzer IV, and Tiger appears.
Yeah.
Good idea, bad idea, necessary?
Sound idea, kind of. Okay, the Tiger. First of all, let me get one thing out of the way. Our armchair generals today always get in here, look at the Tiger, get these teary eyes. The Tiger, it's so beautiful. And then they say, if they only would have built numbers, if they had built thousands of them, we would have won. Thing is, the Wehrmacht generals and the engineers would have laughed at them because they recognized the Tiger as what it was, a special instrument, a tool of precision for a special task. And that task was hitting holes in the front of the enemy, opening the gap, and then send normal medium tanks through it. That was the job of the Tiger. And he did that very well. And he transformed by necessity to the firemen of the Eastern Front. They had to be everywhere. They were used like standard tanks, sometimes in murderously dumb ways, because the infantry officers on the ground who got the Abteilung, who got the units,
they didn't understand the requirements.
They issued orders that were ridiculous. There are at least two orders from the OKH, from the Supreme Command of the Army, saying the Tiger is not invulnerable, the Tiger is not a wonder machine, use it soundly, read the damn manuals. They didn't. So that's the reason why, for example, nearly 1,400 Tigers were produced, but there are just 6 on display in museums. There were not even 500 King Tigers, but there are nearly a dozen of them on display, because the Tigers were, so to say, used up on the front. Mm-hmm. Every Tiger was bombed out, shoot out, everything, and the King Tigers were just breaking down, and everyone's okay, we go beside it.
All right, so the Tiger is probably maybe a good idea, often misused.
Indeed. It was a perfect tool for the task it was designed for. You could debate if it strangled up too many resources, too many work hours, because it was very hard to build. But then again, that's a basic problem of all the German Panzer industry, or the handiwork, the Meister-Einfluss, the German Meisters, the masters.
Craftsmen.
Yeah, actually, the German word Meister implies more. It's the man on the ground in the factory controlling everything, hand polishing everything, and saying, okay, now we can go, Tiger. And that's more of the problem. Maybe there could have been, I don't know for sure, but maybe there could have been a middle ground between the perfection of the Tiger not being brought to front because the leather seating is missing, and the T-34. Maybe there would have been a middle ground somewhere between, but the Germans did as they did.
All right. So, I mean, you would think then that if it was used as originally designed, so you take a battalion of these things, you bring them to the battlefield, they punch the hole, then you immediately pull them back and you repair them and you maintain them, and you take that time, and then a week later, 2 weeks later, you get another hole that you get to punch. Then that would have worked out a bit better, but they just didn't do it.
Could have. I'm always cautious about theoretical history because you know the scenario where the young lieutenant is on the battlefield and says, okay, I lead my platoon to this way. There's an anti-tank station. Okay, then I go there. There's another one too. So the second way wouldn't have worked either. So maybe the Tiger wouldn't have worked in any way, but the other system sounds more sound.
We go over, we have the transport problems, the logistical problems. There's this strange distraction going on in North Africa.
Yeah, small thing.
Sucking up more resources.
Yeah, indeed.
And then somebody shows up with the Panther.
Yes.
Aha, we now have the best tank in the world. Now, there are some people that say that it was so complicated that they would be better off just building lots more Panzer IVs. I don't agree with that theory. I asked Hillary, he doesn't agree with that theory. Do you agree with this theory?
I actually don't feel competent to have an opinion one way or the other. I think both scenarios would have worked out. I wouldn't go so far to say the Panzer IV upgrading would be the better scenario. I think it would have been an equal worthy scenario to consider. Because if you look at what happens in Normandy later, the Panzer IVs in the latest versions fight well, they fight really well. The Panthers have, of course, their advantages, but especially on the Western Front, they don't really have the possibility to use it.
The range is too short. Right?
That's the main problem. We always get this, the Tiger and the Panther, they can hit things over 3 kilometers. Yeah, but they don't have 3 kilometers. They don't.
Meters.
Yes, and if you are the Panther commander, you know you have not paper thin, but very thin sides and a back. And if you're dealing with laughable Shermans albeit in great numbers, being all around you, breaking through hedges, surprising you sometimes, and even if they don't surprise you, just flanking you on both sides, you have one turret. That's a problem.
And what was the German opinion of the Shermans and the Cromwells and the T-34? Because you hear on the American side of things is, oh, I inspected a German tank and it had a much bigger gun than us and it had a much bigger armor than us and we were in great terror. But when I was doing my video inside the Panther, and they're going, this is actually very cramped, I don't want to maintain it, and the gunner is blind because they're looking at one side.
Yeah.
So did the Germans look at it and say exactly the opposite? This tank is a terrible gun, a terrible armor, but I'd love to drive it? Or
the Germans don't exist, as always. You have to look who says what. The Wehrmacht is a vast operation, and on the different level, people had different insights. So, for example, a Tiger gunner, Rubbel, Alfred Rubbel, the famous veteran, has this thing, Sherman's laughable, we laughed at them, this famous quote you will always find on Facebook. And that's true. If you're the one guy sitting in the Tiger, having the Tiger around, you see one Sherman and two Shermans, yes, you are able to laugh at it, unless it's a Firefly. If you look one level higher, if you're a company commander, the view begins to change. Maybe the Sherman has its flaws, maybe the Cromwell has its flaws, but there are damn many of them. They're everywhere, and they have more fuel than we have. And the crews are getting better. Doesn't look so good. And up the levels you go, and the impression is getting bleaker and bleaker. And if you ask the engineers, the judgment of the German engineers is much more differentiated. They say, yes, this tank has many flaws, but many advantages too. It's just like ours. So if you peel away the propaganda and the politics, what comes out is basically everybody who's professionally dealing with tanks knows there is no Wunder tank, there is no super tank, and normally there is no really bad tank because really bad tanks seldomly made it off to the front. Seldomly. Sometimes they did. So when the people are really talking bad about the Allied tanks, how laughable they were, that's the post-war generation sitting in their armchairs again and making judgments.
Do you have, out of curiosity, because I've been asked this myself and I don't know the answer, I can tell you how many American tankers were killed in the war because it's in the public, 1,470 I think officially. Do we know how many German tankers were killed versus how many fought? I
don't know yet, but it's one of my aims to research this year actually, because I never found the number anywhere. I found it for the Soviet tankers. And it's easy to remember for the Soviet tankers because everybody knows Das Boot, the German submarine. And the opening screen is 40,000 U-boat soldiers went to the front 30,000 died.
Yes.
Single interesting fact, roughly 400,000 people served in the armored corps of the Soviets, and 300,000 died. So you have the same ratio, just a zero more. Easy to remember. So, and I'm looking for the same numbers for the Germans, but I haven't found them yet. So maybe if the internet with its great wisdom knows it, bring it to me, but only with a source.
With a source.
Always only with a source.
Okay, so we have, anyway, back to Panther. Panther shows up.
Yes.
New wonder weapon, hooray! And we're going to defeat the enemy with this fantastic tank that seems to keep breaking down. I mean, it shows up at Kursk, and I think one or two just burn up on the train, just getting off.
Actually, while unloading, yes, indeed, must have been a spectacular sight. That the Panther was rushed to the front and was, as in English, teething problems. That's well known, and the people who got the tanks understood that. The Panther then was improved, but he wasn't long at the front if you actually count the months, and he still had problems over the months. He was never running very good, not to speak of flawless, but never running good or very good, but acceptable for what he was bringing at the table. Because once you got it rolling, it was quick, nimble, good gun, good frontal armor. If you were a good commander, only the front shows to the enemy. So that was okay. It's a good trade-off, so to say, but it's not a wonder weapon. And I think the crews wouldn't have called it this at the time.
All right, so we beat the tanks to death. I mean, we can do more, but let's move on because we're running out of time. Panzerjägers or Jägerpanzers, one or the other. What's the difference between the two?
The difference is that actually there isn't a difference. The name, what you call tank destroyers in German, is either Panzerjäger, meaning tank hunters, or Jagdpanzer, meaning hunting tanks. And it's all just psychology. They never had a defined word for that, so they used both as they wanted to, even in the official documents. But what they meant was mostly turretless tanks with two big advantages. If you have no turret, it's easier, cheaper, and faster to produce, and you can house a bigger gun because you have more space for the recoil of the gun.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. I wish we could go on. We probably could go on. The camera, unfortunately, cannot because we've sucked the batteries dry and the cards. So I'm afraid I'm just going to have to come back to Feature Point and terrorize
no.
again later.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
I have to deal with that.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.